We've talked about shooting modes, but the camera measures the exposure it believes to be the correct one by what we call metering. Now, every camera names these metering modes in slightly different ways, but in the Nikon camera system, there are four types of metering. There's matrix metering. It diagnoses the tone, contrast, highlights, shadows, color, and depth, and a few more things. It's a very sophisticated metering mode, and this will be the best overall metering for most situations if you want to rely on the camera to meter the scene. Now, center weighted metering reads the light in the center of the frame, weighted or biased to about 75% to the middle of the frame. Spot metering is even more precise. It reads about 1.5% biased to the middle of the frame. Now, highlighted weighted metering tries to prevent simply overexposure in the highlights.
So now we're showing you a practical demonstration on metering modes. How does the camera determine the exposure? How does it measure what's in front of us? Well, there are several ways, and many camera systems will actually have different terminology. Well, let's just have a look at what's on this camera, and it'll be common to most. So right now, if you look at metering, there's several different things that we can look at. There's matrix that basically evaluates what the camera is seeing, its color, depth, dimension, texture, a whole bunch of things. Some camera systems don't do that, it just measures tone. So matrix metering is quite sophisticated. So that's one of them. Then you've got center weighted metering. That basically covers a small portion of the center of the frame. It measures that particular tone. Then you've got spot metering. So let's go here. Spot metering measures something small. You can basically see it in the symbol very clearly. And highlight weighted metering is something like you're shooting a landscape. Let's say you have 1/3 of a bright full sky, and then you have a dark, deep red landscape. Traditionally, the camera will see all that bright sky and darken everything. If you put it on highlight weighted metering, what you're saying to the camera, give us a bit of forgiveness. We have a bright sky. Just give me some detail in that sky, but bring the exposure up a little bit in that deep area as well. For the sake of the conversation, the argument, I'm not going to show you every single one of them, but I'll show you a little bit. Watch what happens here. On matrix metering, do you see how it's giving me an exposure? By the way, for the sake of this conversation, I am on program mode. So I'm not driving the car at all. The camera is doing the work. Now, you would expect that if I have his face in the particular frame, that the exposure will be exactly the same. Well, you'd almost expect it to, but it's not like a human. It doesn't know that I have a lot of negative space. It doesn't know what I want from that particular look. I've chosen something quite dramatic here because I deliberately want to challenge the camera a little bit. So if we see him here, let's see if we can get your eyes in that highlight. Just there, just back, just there, perfect. Peer off this way. That's it. Keep turning your face more and more. Keep on going. Don't be shy, don't be shy. That's it, just there. Okay, good. Okay, so do you see how we've got a combination of shutter speed? Well, it already changed. 160, 3.2 at 80 ISO. Now it's at 200, 3.5. It's at 160. And as I have more or less negative space, and depending on what I include in the frame, the exposure changes quite dramatically. So that's the value of metering. I'm telling you, it probably is the best of all of the metering modes because it covers everything, including color, texture, depth, and dimension. How does it do it? I don't know. It's pretty incredible. I still don't believe it can think as well as a human. Now, if you talk about center-weighted metering, it's going to be biased. You can clearly see it's giving us a circle. It's going to be biased to what's in the middle of the frame. Watch what happens. So I'm at 200 speed 3.5 at 80 ISO. The minute I move it, do you see how it's saying, well, wait a second, you know what? That's a lot darker. I'm going to brighten this up a little bit. Wait a second, let me go back to him. So it's going to be biased to the center of the frame. And while we're here, why not? Let's go to spot metering. Spot metering is going to measure a very tiny portion of that frame and say, I want to meter for that area. Now, what am I saying? What are we telling the camera? I want to measure a small part of the frame, and you're going to tell me what you believe to be a good exposure. Now, as we showed you in a different part of this course, when we photographed that black figure on that black velvet chair with that black background, when a camera sees something dark, whether it's evaluative metering matrix metering, spot metering. If the camera or that spot is on a piece of black, camera's going to basically say, I don't want black, I want mid-gray, therefore overexposing the photograph and making it look terrible. So what I want you to do is understand that the camera can only go so far. It has to have an average, a standard, if you will. So we need to know that in a situation like this, we need to drive the train. So I'm going to go back on manual. Manual, 250 speed f2. I'm actually going to photograph, even though it doesn't really matter at this point because I'm going to be shooting on manual, but let me put it back on matrix metering for the sake of the conversation. I'm going to shoot with the black and white picture control. You can see that on the manual setting that I've already got it set at, it's actually overexposed. And all I simply do is move one of my dials, as in my shutter speed, my aperture, or my ISO, until it looks good. Well, we've already established that I prefer to do my speed first, my aperture second, and then I just simply move my ISO. If I have enough light or too much, I just change it accordingly. So do me a favor, mate, turn this way. Or actually do this. And that's it, tilt more, chin down, and then look, peer off this way. Just where my, there you go, just there, perfect. So guys, have a look. We're going to run out of ISO here. Okay. Now let me actually manually focus this image on single point so I can really go right there in the highlight. So if you're blinded, you're in the right spot. Chin up. That's it. Give me a hint of a squint. It's very good because you're actually in the sun anyway. Yeah, I love that. That's very cool. Check that out. I need more juice. I actually want to go to 1.2, but I need to darken the exposure down. This is one of the very rare situations that I focus on the eye that's furthest away from the camera. Turn your face more left, mate. Actually, keep on going. Keep on going. And then tilt. There you go, just there. And now I've got both eyes in light. And now I am focusing on the eye that's close to the camera because we've got it in light. Turn your face more and then turn your face more left. More, more, more. 1 second, tilt this way. Yep, other way. Actually, just there, just there. Awesome, don't move. Cool, love that. And then turn your face back again. That's it. And tilt again. Chin down, that's it. Eyes up here, eyes higher. And then hint of a squint. Awesome, hold it. Perfect, guys, lots of fun. Take your time. I want you to drive the actual camera. I want you to experience the joy of being able to say that you crafted the image from scratch. Difference between getting a ready-made meal or actually getting the ingredients and making it to taste and giving you the desired result you want. Because after all, as you add or subtract the elements that you want in that particular dish, it makes it uniquely yours. I want to show you this example because this will prove to you that whether you photograph on the program mode, the aperture priority mode and shutter priority mode, if you don't do some thinking and you allow the camera to do all the work, in some situations, you are going to get a bad result. And a bad result, I mean, it's not the way you see it with your own two eyes or the way you expect to see it. To prove to you that shooting on program or shutter or aperture priority modes are not always going to be the best. Now, certainly it might be an easy way to start, and you might be tempted to do that, but this course is all about helping you to craft an image and understand your camera to know that it has to have a baseline of some description, but you have to do some of the thinking. So we're going to go extreme. So we have a black sculpture here, then it's actually on a black chair with a black background. So let's ignore the metering modes that I'm on. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore that for the moment. The camera is looking at this particular scene and it's telling me that it wants to shoot at a 30th of a second at f3 because I chose an ISO of 400. So remember, program mode is basically going to choose the shutter speed and the aperture, but you choose everything else. So you see 30th of a second, f3, 400. Now watch what happens when I increase my ISO. It's automatically increasing my speed. Do you see that? Now, do you see how the exposure doesn't change? Well, it won't change because my camera is on a tripod looking at the exact same subject matter, and it's going to keep the exact look the entire time. As we talked about in our exposure conversation, is that exposure is give and take. As you move one thing changes, another thing has to change, assuming that the light on your subject matter is exactly the same, which for the moment it is. So right now, again, I can quickly move my ISO up and down and my exposure doesn't change, as in the look of my exposure doesn't change. The numerical values of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO do, but this is what I'm getting at. I'm photographing a black figurine on a black velvet chair with a black velvet background, and it's not rendering as black because what the camera is doing is seeing all this black and says, I don't want black, I need to have it average. I'm actually going to photograph and I want to make this look mid-gray. So let me just take a shot in this environment, knowing that it actually is overexposed. Well, it's correctly exposed by what the camera is saying, but it's actually overexposed. Let's discuss exposure compensation. Now, what does that word compensation mean? We're compensating. We're saying that the camera can't do all the thinking for us. It's seeing a dark, dense, black subject matter, and we need to compensate for what the camera is doing. So if I put my finger on the plus and the minus, so you see that exposure meter come up there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on clicking down. Theoretically, I'm underexposing, but I'm actually exposing correctly because I want my subject matter to appear black the way I see it with my own two eyes. So is that about where I need to be? It probably is. Typically, in a black circumstance, you need about 4 to 5 third stop increments underexposed. So let me re-explain that. The camera is seeing something dark, could be a black cat in a black rug. You need to know the camera is going to see the black and saying, I don't want black, I'm going to make it mid-gray. Therefore, basically overexposing that image, as in making the image appear brighter than what you see with your own two eyes. So you can do it this way. You can go to exposure compensation and then click down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's based upon experience. I know it's about 5 clicks, almost 2 stops from something very dark to be correctly exposed. Now let's go back to where we were. That is what the camera would have actually taken. So if you photograph 4 African-American men wearing a black suit leaning on a black wall, it's going to be overexposed. It's going to look terrible. So you need to know that program mode or aperture priority or shutter priority will not do the right thing by you. So like I said, you either flick to manual and adjust accordingly, visually to taste, or you compensate, as we did just then. Let's look at the difference. Much better rendering of what we see with our own two eyes. It looks black with a few little highlights here and there, and that's what the camera gave us. Let's talk about shooting modes. So you have quite a few options to choose from. You've got program, shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. Now, some cameras have A, as in auto, where the camera does everything. As far as the program mode, what it does, it chooses the shutter speed and the aperture for you, and you have control of pretty much everything else. We're talking about programs right now, but I want to discuss how I'm actually focusing. I'm using auto area AF. The camera is doing the focusing for us. So just ignore that part for the moment. Okay, the camera's doing the focusing for us. So I'm photographing in program mode now. I'm letting the camera do the thinking for me. So I can set the ISO. So let's say the ISO is 400. Now, right now, the camera is telling me, hey, Jerry, I think we should use a speed of 320 at 4.5. Okay, let's have a look at that. We blink, but that's okay. We'll do another one. Okay, it's given me a pretty good exposure. We have quite a neutral background. There's no heavy blacks, there's no heavy whites. It's rendering the scene and actually measuring this environment correctly. It's given me a great exposure. But watch what happens. So look at the bottom there. Do you see where it says 320 speed 4.5? Do you see as I move around my environment, in and around my house here, look what happens right now. The camera is seeing bright, it doesn't know what to do, but look at the actual speed go up and down, the aperture change. But what happens if I want to drive the car, so to speak, and I want to choose how much I want in focus. I want to choose the shutter speed to freeze any kind of motion. Well, we've got a few other choices. So now we've got the camera mode here. Let's flick it on shutter priority. What we're basically saying to the camera is, I want to prioritize the shutter speed that I'm working with because they might be moving. Now, they're not moving, it's not really a problem, but you can see very clearly that the shutter speed can change. I can't change anything else. With shutter priority, I'm prioritizing the shutter speed that I actually want to use, and the camera will choose the aperture that it believes to be the appropriate one combined with it. Now, as I'm actually focusing on them, as you can see, I can change my ISO and the aperture is changing accordingly. So shutter priority is maybe good for something that you're doing like freezing high action sports. Maybe you're photographing your son at the soccer, you're photographing your kids at the hockey, whatever it may be. You want to freeze the motion. That's where you'll choose shutter priority. Still, I personally prefer to shoot manually because I want to drive the camera, so to speak, and go to my desired destination. It depends on how you photograph. But remember still, as I actually come closer and have more highlight in them, do you see how that aperture will change? How that will change as I get more negative space. But I'm actually photographing the exact same things. So once you get a great exposure, just understand that shutter priority and program's not going to be your best friend. The same thing too for aperture priority, but let me explain what that means. Aperture priority basically means that I'm prioritizing the aperture that I want, and then it will change the shutter speed to go with it. So as you can see right now, I'm at 1.2 and the speed's at 4,000 because I have so much light coming through. So you see how he's in focus right now and she's not. That's okay if that's what I wanted. So let me have a look. And then I can choose the other person's face. So look down at her, mate. Look down right at her. So turn your face right into hers. Right in. Beautiful. Love that. Gorgeous. Hold it. So it's okay in this particular setting because it's quite neutral. But if I had something polarizingly white or polarizingly dark, it's going to be an issue. So either I shoot with aperture priority and then use my compensation. So you've got the plus and the minus dial. So you click on it and you can see there where it's got 0.0, and then I can compensate accordingly. I'm basically saying, hey camera, you're awesome, but I'm compensating because you're not quite understanding what I want. So you might say, I want to compensate and actually shoot 1/3 stop over than what you think a great exposure is. So that's what I do. Perfect. Now, personally, I still don't like to shoot that way. I like to shoot with a manual setting, and I'll show you why, and it's not that far different to what we discussed, but let me explain a bit further. So let's click on manual. You might see me struggling to hold this camera. It's a bit weird the way I'm doing it. It's because the bracket's here and this kind of stuff is here. It's a little bit awkward, but that's okay. So you might say, well, Jerry, well, why would you actually prefer shooting on the manual mode where it clearly is not giving you a great result? Well, here's what I recommend. Put your shutter speed on a safe handheld shutter speed. So in this case, I've got 250 speed. Then I'm choosing a very shallow depth of field. In fact, I think I might choose a deeper depth of field. They're slightly on a different plane. I want them both in focus. So I might actually choose an aperture of about 3.2. I think we'll get them both in focus. Then all I've got to do is change the ISO. Now, I want you to watch this for a moment. So let's have a look at what we're doing here. In fact, let me put this back on a tripod. All right, so let's compose that shot the way we like it. They're looking really cool there. Love the way you've nestled in his shoulder there. He's looking badass as well. Turn your face this way. Turn your face a touch that way. Good, just there. Again, they're a little bit overexposed right now. So what we're going to do is this. We've chosen the speed. We've chosen our aperture, and then all I've got to do is actually move my ISO setting until it looks good. And guess what? It's exactly what the camera would have chosen to be a great exposure. It just worked out that way. If he was wearing a black jacket, he was brunette, she was wearing a black jacket, this would be a problem. So I look at the shot, I take it, I'm happy. I want you to peer out to the left there, mate, and you keep on looking at me. Gorgeous. Give me a little hint of a squint, a bit more mystery. That's it, good. Chin up a little bit. I want a separation between your lips and your shoulder. Perfect. Hold it. Chin down there, mate, more. Face to the right a bit more, mate. Bit more this way. Tilt more. Chin down more. And then peer out this way. Awesome. Hold it. Just changing my framing here. Beautiful. Here's a bit of a warning. When you're photographing in program mode or aperture priority or shutter priority, you'll find that if you go too far in one of the settings, that one of the settings will blink and it's telling you that it's a mistake. So let me show you what that basically means. So let's say, for example, I'm on shutter priority like I am right now, and let's say I'm choosing, let's say, the lowest ISO possible. Do you see where the aperture is blinking? It's saying there's a problem here. It's warning, warning, we've got a problem. All right, let's take that shot. It's a bit of an issue. But let's say if I go too far and I keep on going with this, you see how even though with mirrorless camera system you're seeing live exposure, what it's basically doing, it's blinking and it's giving you a warning. Now you might say, well, the camera sucks. Hate to say it to you, you suck. The problem is you didn't understand what your camera was doing. I've got to tell you, I failed so many times in the early part of my career because I didn't know or understand exactly what the camera was doing. So when you're seeing your subject matter like this, the camera is giving you a bit of a helping hand. Although you're underexposing dramatically and your final shot will be very, very dark, I'm going to keep the view in your camera with what you pretty much see with your own two eyes. So whenever you see one of those settings blinking, let's do it on the aperture setting. Okay, so you can sort of see how I want an aperture of 1.2. Okay, so now, let's say if I've increased my ISO, no, other way. Now, you would never use a combination of aperture and shutter speed and ISO like this, but I just wanted to show you the extreme. I've chosen 1.4, 8000 ISO, 32,000 speed. You would never do this, by the way. You can clearly see that the shutter speed is blinking. That's telling you there's a problem with the exposure. So get to a point where you're shooting on manual, you get to a speed that you can safely handhold, you pick your desired aperture, and either with a custom setting on your lens, if you don't have that, you basically press the ISO button on your camera system, the main command dial on your camera system, and then you adjust to taste. Right there, we've got beautiful detail. And then just relax that shoulder, bring that chin up a little bit so we can see you. And we've got the shot. Works every time. In the way that I like to photograph, I make my life a lot easier. I set my speed, I'm safe with the subject matter that I'm actually photographing. I set my desired aperture, how many things I want in focus. I have one thing left. How much gas do I need? How much ISO do I need? And if your camera system can do the same and you can program, let's say your lens, or even if it's going to the normal buttons to change your ISO, no problem, let's do that. So we're gonna just open up, we just move the ISO dial that we've programmed until we get beautiful detail. You can see how we've gone too dark here. And as we go brighter, we still got detail on the skin, it's looking good. And again, we're exactly that exposure meter where it says -0 and plus, we're pretty much exactly the way the camera would have exposed the shot. I just have more creative control. So when I'm photographing, I look around my subject matter and I simply turn that dial until I have detail on the brightest highlight. I take a photograph and I'm good to go. I don't have to change my setting based upon the fact that I'm using a wide angle lens or a close-up, because I'm getting the exact same skin tone and the exact same tones that I want with my subject matter. So make it easy for yourself. Just try it my way. I've got to be honest with you, you may just find more consistent results.